Have you ever had one of those, are you kidding me moments? Those moments when something happens that there's just no logical explanation for it, right? It's something that's out of context, something that just, it just doesn't seem to fit. This last week, Stacy and I took some time and we spent the week in Yellowstone. And as we came back yesterday, and came back to 95 degrees here, I almost turned around and went back. Because the hottest it got there was 81. Mornings were upper 30s, low 40s. 81 was the hottest we saw in the park. And come back and it's like, are you kidding me? 95! Man, hot. But Yellowstone's a great place for those are you kidding me stories. They really need a sign that says Yellowstone is not a petting zoo. Because we hear those stories, right? The one we were reminded of on one of our tours of the person, I can't remember how long this was ago, but they put peanut butter on their child's face so that they could get a picture of a bear licking it off. Now, are you kidding me? That can't be. We got to see a guy walking out to a bison. The bison ended up between him and his car, and he's getting closer and closer. And our tour guide almost stopped. He said, we might get to see something out here. Because what I learned, and this guy probably doesn't know, is that big 2,000-pound piece of beef can get up to 35 miles an hour in 6 seconds. There is no human being on the planet that can outrun that. And yet, people are out there getting close, wanting to get that picture taken. As we drove along the road, we saw a crowd gathered. We thought, oh, probably more bison. We see those in Medora. They're majestic, they're cool, but you don't have to stop every time for them. But what we got to see were some cow elk and their babies. And we also got to see people out of their cars inching closer and closer and closer. Are you kidding me? Do you realize what that mama can do to you? But we don't think. And as we think on our own history, we all have those are you kidding me type events and stories. When I was in college at Concordia in Nebraska, I have a friend that I met there named John Sharp, and he's a Missouri Synod Lutheran pastor out in Illinois. And one of my icebreaker questions as a freshman was, hey, where are you from? And if I didn't recognize the city name, I would say, what's the ballpark population of that place? Well, I asked John, where are you from? He says, Effingham, Kansas. I said, well, how many people are in Effingham? And he says, well, see, there's 2 people in that house, and there's another 5 in that one. I can't remember if that's inside the town limits or not, but there's another 3 over there. You got up to about 25 people, I think. And John's a good guy, funny guy, extremely overly intelligent in many ways. He tutored me in Greek so I could get into seminary. And he's also from Kansas. And in Montana we make fun of North Dakotans. Well, in Colorado we make fun of Kansas. And I mercifully poked at him and teased him. And finally he said, you know what? You're going to be a pastor in Kansas someday. And I said, I don't think so. No way. God doesn't want me to live in Kansas. Well, fast forward. The end of seminary. And the end of April of the 4th year of seminary, when I graduated in the last millennium, they have what they call a call service, or a placement service. And it's this worship service that some of you would just adore. Big organ, choir, pastors that actually wear robes, and it's this big to-do. And then at the end of that, they start handing out assignments. And they do it alphabetically. First guy in my class is called Michael Abram. And then they gave the congregation, the city, and the district that he was called to. By the time they get to me, David Hall, Trinity Lutheran Church, Leavenworth, Kansas. By the way, not far from Effingham, Kansas. By this time, I had hoped to get closer to southeastern Montana. I had asked, I said, can you get me within a half day to a day's drive of southeastern Montana to be closer to family? And as they're going alphabetically, they get through the H's, they get through the J's, the K's, they get to L's. Robert Lane, Hope Lutheran Church, Billings, Montana. My classmate Bob is still at Hope Lutheran Church down in Lockwood. He's in his mid-70s, and he said, you know, when I retire, I might get a doctorate. At the rate he's going, I said, you know, you're probably going, I'm going to probably retire before you do, so you're going to be like 90 when you get to that point. But God has his own things. But it was one of those, are you kidding me moments, right? Not only do I end up in Kansas, outside of Kansas City, where this minor league football team plays, but I end up 16 hours from family in southeastern Montana. And yet God did his work. Spent 10 years pastoring 3 different congregations in Kansas. And some of our longest and best friends are from that decade in Kansas. Your stories are also filled, I'm guessing, with those are you kidding me type moments. Those moments when the unexpected happens, or the thing that you really don't want is what shows up. I mean, history is littered with this. Can you imagine the look on Christopher Columbus's face when he realized he didn't land in the West Indies, but he landed on this new continent called North America? Right? That's another, are you kidding me? What? There's not supposed to be land here. But there was. A lot of it. And there still is. Our lives are filled with these are you kidding me stories, and the Bible is filled with them. I mean, we look at this guy named Saul of Tarsus. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was the devoted follower of the God he thought he was supposed to follow. Until that one day, right? He's trying to exterminate these people of the way. He's breathing out murderous threats, riding on his horse when he's blinded by a light and knocked to the ground. And he hears that voice. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He hears the voice of Jesus and realizes that he was doing the exact opposite of what he should have been doing. And then God gets a hold of Saul. And he gets a hold of Saul and connects him with a guy named Ananias. And God says to Ananias, hey, there's this guy named Saul. Maybe you've heard of him. He's got a really bad reputation among your people, among my people, among the Jesus followers. I want you to have him come to your house and hang out for 3 days. And Ananias says, are you kidding me? Do you know who this guy is? And God has these words that he adds from Acts chapter 9. The Lord replied, go. This man is the agent I have chosen to carry my name before Gentiles, kings, and Israelites. I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. Saul wrote much of what we have as a New Testament in our Bibles. He planted many churches, and he managed to get paraded through the Roman legal system. He reached non-Jewish people, and he got to speak in front of kings. And he got to share Jesus. Not the most likely character. But then again, we have this faith story that is enshrouded in a cross and an empty tomb, right? I mean, the disciples thought, Jesus died, we're doomed, now what? We've given up everything we've had, we've been following this guy for 3 years, we thought he would be the one. And as people went to the tomb, they were met with the message. He is not here. He is risen.
He's risen indeed. Hallelujah.
I know, it's been a long time since Easter. I get it. Just making sure you're still awake today, right? But that's another one of those, are you kidding me moments? Because dead people stay dead, right? But Jesus is alive, and he still lives. And then you look at his ministry. You know, he heals many people. He speaks to large crowds. He feeds large crowds of 5,000 and 4,000 men plus women and children. And he does it with just a few loaves of bread and a few fish. a lot of "are you kidding me" type moments in Jesus' history, in Jesus' story as he walked this earth. One of those we have as our reading right before the message today from Luke 10. You know, we have Mary and Martha, the sisters. Their brother is Lazarus. They're hosting Jesus at their house, and Jesus is teaching, and Martha is slaving away in the kitchen while her sister Mary sits with the men and listens to Jesus. Everybody knows Mary's not supposed to be sitting there. Martha says, really, she's not supposed to be sitting there, Jesus. She's supposed to be helping me. Go tell her to help me. And Jesus says, Martha, Martha, Mary has chosen the right thing. And for Martha, that was probably one of those "are you kidding me" moments. Knowing Jesus first. One of my favorite comedians is Jim Gaffigan. And as he does some religious humor, and a lot of not religious humor, he's a Roman Catholic. And he said, you know, can you imagine that happening today? This angel come into this young teen girl and saying, God wants you to be his baby mama. It sounds a little sacrilegious, but that's not really far off the text, right? We have all these stories that for those of us that have been in church a long time, seem just normal, seem just commonplace, just like seeing a bison, right? That's another one of those big wild cows, whatever, right? But for people who haven't seen them, they go, ooh, that's amazing. And sometimes it's fun to capture their enthusiasm. And to capture the enthusiasm of people who are seeing these stories through a lens that we're not seeing it through. If you go on, that's different. Are you kidding me? God put his child in the body of a 15-year-old girl? Wow. That's different. But God's into doing things like that, isn't he? I mean, we go back through the Old Testament and we have more stories. Right, we have Daniel, who was in Babylon. The Israelites, the Old Testament Israelites, had been captured, and they were there in Babylon, and they were being, trying to be pushed into the Babylonian religion. And Daniel said, no, God is only to do that, so I'm going to do things God's way. And Daniel got thrown into a den of lions, and God zipped those lions shut. Zipped their mouths shut, and they didn't touch him. Earlier in Daniel, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Same thing happens. They're supposed to obey the Babylonians and assimilate with their culture. But they say, no, God wants us to do things this way. And they get thrown into a furnace that's heated up to 7 times the normal temperature. As everybody looked in there, they saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and someone who looked like a son of man walking in. And they came out with not even one hair singed. Amazing. Amazing stories. We have David and Goliath, right? David comes out, this young shepherd boy comes out to his brothers who are soldiers, and they're there with King Saul, and they're all hiding, and they're quaking in their boots because there's this big bad warrior, this giant of a man, this decorated warrior, standing out in the middle of Goliath, and he's calling them out. And he's calling their God out, calling our God out. And it doesn't take long before David has enough. He says, forget you guys. I'm going to go out there and take care of this thing goes God. And Saul says, well, if you're going to fight a man's battle, you need to dress the part. And so Saul gives David his suit of armor, his warrior's clothing. Now Saul was a head above everybody else, so he was probably about 6'1". David was a young boy, so he was probably about 5 feet tall, about a foot shorter. Can you imagine this young boy, about 5 feet tall, putting on this grown man's armor and trying to lumber out? It didn't take long before he said, this isn't going to work. Yeah. I've got a slingshot, and I take care of lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. And so he went and gathered 5 smooth stones, which turns out was 4 more than he needed. And God gave him the skill, through his time as a shepherd, to take that stone and whip it and smack Goliath right in his forehead. And they took Goliath's own sword and cut off his head. Stories that are just defy. They seem unreal. They seem too good to be true. And yet we believe that God inspired this book, and it tells us the truth. And there's that battle plan that God used like one time in Jericho. And it's the one that makes perfect sense, right? Walk around a city one time every day for 6 days, and on day 7, do it 7 times. Shout, blow your trumpets, and the walls will fall down. Right! You kidding me? No, can't happen. But it did. And we keep on paging back. And we get to Noah. We get to Noah and the ark. It had never rained. People didn't know what rain was. And God tells Noah to build this big boat, to grab 2 of every unclean animal, to grab 7 of every clean animal, and put them on this boat. And God sealed it up. And for the first time, it rained. And Noah and his family and those animals were saved. God does epic stuff. He does amazing stuff in this world. And one of those stories we also find in Genesis with Abraham and Sarah. Back when they were Abram and Sarah, when Abraham was 75, God came to them and said, hey, I want you to follow me and pack up your stuff, pack up all the stuff of your servants, 318 of them, and let's start walking, and I'll tell you when and where to stop. Can you imagine the phone call to a moving company? Saying, hey, you know, I'd like a bid on a move, but I don't know where I'm going to end up. Can you just tell me what that's going to be? But that's the way God worked. And by the way, Abraham was not a follower of God prior to this point. His father was a pagan idol worshiper. But God called him, and Abraham responded. And God gave that promise to him that we have in Genesis chapter 12. The Lord said to Abram, leave your land, your family, and your father's household for the land that I will show you. And I will bless you to be a blessing. And God promises them that we'll have many descendants. And he and Sarah had never had kids. And Abraham stresses about this. He says, how is this going to be? And Abram and Sarai try to take matters into their own hands. And Sarai says, Abram, hey, here's my handmaiden Hagar. Have a child with her. And Ishmael's born when Abram is 86. And God says, nice try, but not how I drew it up. You will have a child. And we touch in on Abram's story again in Genesis 17, when God says, but me, my covenant is with you. You will be the ancestor of many nations. And because I have made you the ancestor of many nations, your name will no longer be Abram, but Abraham. I will make you very fertile. I will produce nations from you, and kings will come from you. At this point, Sarah is 89. Abraham is 99. Still no child. But God had a promise. A promise that he intended to keep. And so then we catch up with our text for today from Genesis 18. And there are 3 men who roll up to their tent. And by the way, Abram at 99 had just been circumcised before this. He was relaxing, trying to heal from that. These 3 men pop up, and he stands up and he runs to greet them. Now, seeing a 99-year-old guy stand up and run to greet would be funny in enough itself. But imagine a guy that's healing from being circumcised. Oh, that had to be an awkward, painful walk. But he welcomes them, brings them water for their feet, has Sarah and his servants cook up a nice meal for them, a calf cooked in its mother's milk. By the way, that's not kosher. But that's the meal that they were served. And these men who turn out to be God prophesy this prophesy. Then one of the men said, I will definitely return to you about this time next year. Then your wife Sarah will have a son. The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, me give birth at my age? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? When I return to you about this time next year, Sarah will have a son. And Sarah was long past that time of that monthly inconvenience that you women get to deal with. She was long past that transition with her own personal summers. And she's going, this is crazy. God, are you kidding me? I am 89 years old, and I'm going to have a child? And all she can do is laugh. But is anything impossible for God? No. Nothing's impossible for God. And so yes, Abraham at 100 and Sarah at 90 had a baby. I don't know what's crazier, them having a baby or them raising a child when they're that age. I'm in my 50s and going, oh, I am so glad that that is behind me. I'm not sure I could have the energy today. But God did it. He fulfilled that promise. He gave them Isaac. And He gave them many nations that descended from Isaac. And He gave them us. Because we are part of that promise. We are part of those many nations, those many descendants of Abraham, as we are grafted into God's family because of Jesus. Jesus also born in a very improbable way, at just the right time in history. Born to Mary. And He lived, He died, He rose again so that we could be welcomed into God's family. Think about it. You are a son and daughter of the King of the universe, the creator of all that was, is, and ever will be. That's mind-blowing. That is, are you kidding me kind of stuff. That is beyond our comprehension. And it is through Jesus that we get to embrace this promise that Paul wrote to the church in Colossae from Colossians 1. Once you were alienated from God, and you were enemies with Him in your minds, which was shown by your evil actions. But now He has reconciled you by His physical body through death, to present you before God as a people who are holy, faultless, and without blame. We have a God who makes the impossible possible. And He does it in some really unique ways. I mean, think about baptism. The baptismal font is where our journey with Jesus begins. As I shared earlier, when I went to seminary, it was at a time where people thought that, well, you get pastors from seminary. Seminaries just make pastors. No, congregations make pastors. My journey to becoming a pastor started when I was baptized in May of 1972 on a Saturday afternoon at Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Colorado Springs. And that church served as an incubator for me, as did a couple other churches in my journey. And God worked through that. But think about baptism. Just plain water. Ordinary tap water. Dirty river water. Whatever it is that's water, God uses. And He combines it with His Word and His promise. The promise to be with us always. And that whoever is baptized, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. And whoever does not believe will be condemned. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. We get to be part of God's family. And God does it, just ordinary water, combined with His extraordinary Word. God does the same thing with communion. This holy meal that is set before us, where Jesus takes bread, wine, grape juice, and combines it with His body and His blood, His holy self. And as He gives it to us, He forgives us. He gives us a clean slate again, and He strengthens us. God is still in the "are you kidding me" business. And I know you guys have your stories. Harold Wrench's got a great one. I know many of you have heard it. A time when he was in Vietnam. And if you want to hear that story, connect with Harold. Let him tell you. I know some of you are cancer survivors. Those are "are you kidding me" type moments. Where God does, He makes the impossible possible. As He works healing from a disease that takes many, many people. We all have different experiences that we've had, different things that have happened that sometimes as we look at them, we say, that's just ordinary. But for other people, not so much. They're amazing moments. So I want you to think about those stories. And I want you to be ready to share those stories. To share those stories of God making the impossible possible in your life. Because we all have those "are you kidding me" type moments. So what "are you kidding me" moments has God worked in your life? What are those stories for you? What "are you kidding me" moments does God have coming next for you? You might think, I don't have a crystal ball. Okay, think about the things you say will never happen. Right? Never going to be a pastor in Kansas. Yeah, a decade later, yeah, I was a pastor in Kansas. What are those things that you say just, nah, there's no way God's going to do this? That might be the way He shows up in your life. And what "are you kidding me" moments does God have in store for us here in Billings? And if you're a guest with us today, what "are you kidding me" moments does God have in store for you and your congregation and the community you live in? We live with the God who watches over us and walks with us, who does amazing stuff. And He's not done yet. Amen.